one of Hollywood's most respected actors, walks into what should be a routine morning show interview, only to find himself facing off against a host who seems determined to make him look bad on live television. The scenario sounds like a high-stakes drama, but for one brief period of airtime, it became reality. You're about to read is a breakdown of that exchange, an incident that had viewers instantly picking sides and left everyone asking the same unavoidable question: who was really on a line? It was supposed to be just another promotional appearance. Samuel Jackson, a man whose career is built on a foundation of professionalism and unmistakable presence, had a new film to promote. His publicist had scheduled the usual rounds of morning shows, and Good Morning America was first on the list. Jackson arrived at the studio in his typical manner, crew with characteristic warmth, ready for what should have been a straightforward conversation about his latest project. But from the moment he sat down across from Michael Strahan, the atmosphere felt different. The air was charged with an unspoken tension. Strahan's famous, ready smile seemed a little too fixed, his handshake lingering a moment too long, as if he were sizing up his guest rather than welcoming him. Samuel L. Jackson, welcome back to Good Morning America. Strahan began, his voice carrying the familiar polished enthusiasm of morning television. Yet, underneath the cadence, Jackson caught a slight edge that made him subtly straighten his chair. Decades of interviews had honed his instincts. Something was off. Good to be here, Michael, Jackson replied, settling back and crossing his legs, his demeanor calm but his senses alert. So, your new film, Strahan continued, glancing down at his notes. But first, I think our viewers would be interested to know about some of the comments you've made recently about the industry. You've been pretty vocal about certain issues. Jackson's eyebrows raised a fraction of an inch. This was a departure from the agreed-upon script. The pre-interview discussions with producers had been clear. The focus was to be the film, the cast, the director's vision. A deliberate pivot. Well, Michael, I've always been honest about my experiences in this business. Jackson said, his words measured and careful. I think it's important to speak truthfully about the challenges we face as performers and as people, right? Strahan nodded, but his expression suggested he was merely waiting for his guest to finish before advancing his own point. But some people might say that when you're as successful as you are, when you've had the career you've had, maybe it's time to, the positive instead of always bringing up the negative aspects. The question hung in the air, not as an inquiry, but as a challenge. Jackson felt his jaw tighten imperceptibly, but his composure held. He had faced down far more intimidating forces than a talk show host. Jackson said, his voice still level, but now carrying a sharper resonance. Are you suggesting that speaking honestly about important issues is somehow inappropriate? Because I was under the impression that this was supposed to be about my film, not my personal philosophy on social commentary. His Strahan leaned forward, his smile unwavering, but his eyes narrowing. Hey, I'm just saying what some people out there are thinking. You've built this reputation as someone who doesn't hold back. Sometimes viewers wonder if maybe you're being a little too, how should I put this? How should I aggressive in your approach to certain topics? Aggressive. Jackson repeated the word slowly, letting it settle in the studio. The easygoing movie star persona began to recede. Something more intense and focused. That's an interesting choice of words, Michael. Would you use that same word to describe other actors who speak their minds? Or is that a special term you reserve for certain people? The live studio audience, once a murmur of pleasant anticipation, was now utterly still, sensing the shift from promotional chat to philosophical duel. Strahan, rather than retreating, seemed to double down. Look, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or anything, he said, his hands in a gesture that was meant to be conciliatory but came off as condescending. I'm just wondering if you ever think about how your comments might come across to regular people, Americans who just want to be entertained when they go to the movies. So Jack's response was immediate, his voice now filled with the commanding authority that defined his screen presence. Mike, let me ask you something. People watching this show right now are incapable of handling honest conversations about real issues. Too simple to understand that an actor can both entertain them and opinions about the world around them. The directness of the counter question caught Strahan off guard. For a fleeting moment, his polished composure slipped, revealing a flicker of uncertainty. It's not what I'm saying at all. Then what exactly are you saying? Jackson pressed, leaning forward now, his gaze fixed on the host. Because from where I'm sitting, you're suggesting I should keep my mouth shut about things that matter to me and just smile and wave and talk about how great everything is. Is that the kind of interview you want to conduct here? I just think Strahan began, but Jackson was not finished. No, he finished, Jackson said, his voice rising slightly, commanding the space. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've worked with some of the greatest directors in the business. I've been part of films that have moved people, challenged people, entertained people. All that time, I've never once apologized for having opinions or for speaking a mind. So if that makes me aggressive in your book, then I guess we have very different definitions of that word. The studio was silent. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged frantic looks. Two men on stage were locked in a battle of wills. Look, Sam, Strahan said in a casual, familiar use of the shortened name was a clear attempt to diminish Jackson's stature. I respect your career. I really do. I think you forget that not everyone sees the world the way you do. Some people just want to hear about the movie without all the extra commentary. Jackson's eyes narrowed. Sam, we're on Sam terms now. That's interesting. And let me get this straight. People are too fragile to handle a conversation that goes beyond surface level promotion. You think your viewers are that shallow? I think my viewers appreciate honesty. Strahan shot back, his own patience thinning. And honestly, feels like you're more interested in making points than in connecting with people or making points. Jackson repeated, his voice dropped into a dangerous quiet. No. Every film I make, every role I take, every interview I give is about connecting with people. The difference is I don't treat people like they're children who can't handle complex thoughts. I give them credit for being intelligent human beings who can appreciate both entertainment and substance. Sensing he was losing control, Strahan pivoted. leaning into the conflict with renewed force. You know what, Samuel? He said, re-emphasizing the full name in a belated attempt at formality. I've been doing television for a long time too, and I've interviewed a lot of celebrities. Understand that there's a time and place for everything. When you come on a morning show, people are having their coffee, getting ready for work. They want something light, something positive. Jackson's retort was swift and cutting. And now you're the authority on what people want. You've decided that the viewers of the show are incapable of engaging with anything more substantial than fluff pieces and weather reports. That's not what I said. That's exactly what you said. Jackson fired back. You just told me that people having their morning coffee can't handle a real conversation. You've essentially called your own audience shallow, but somehow I'm the problem for giving them credit for being more intelligent than that. Strahan's jaw tightened visibly. Look, think you're making some kind of profound point here, but this is Good Morning America, not a philosophy class. People tune in for entertainment and information, not to be lectured. Jackson's voice rose again, and the studio audience shifted uneasily. Michael, an opinion and expressing it thoughtfully isn't lecturing, it's called being a human being. But apparently in your world, celebrities are supposed to be nothing more than trained seals, clapping and barking on command when you want them to promote something. That's ridiculous. Strahan shot back, his voice also rising. I've had thousands of guests on this show, and most of them managed to have a conversation without turning everything into some kind of political statement or social commentary. Jackson leaned back in his chair, and a familiar calm descended over him. It was the calm before the storm, a presence his fans would recognize from his most iconic roles. Political statement, he repeated. Michael, when did talking about treating people with respect become political? Suggesting that audiences are intelligent become controversial. You're the one who turned this interview in this direction. I came here to talk about my film, remember? And we can still do that, Strahan said, though his tone betrayed his intention. But first, should address the elephant in the room. A lot of people feel like you've become too comfortable using your platform to push your personal agenda. My personal agenda. Jackson repeated, the edge in his voice now razor sharp. And what agenda would that be? Strahan seemed to realize he was stepping on a treacherous ground, but he pressed on. I mean, you're constantly talking about inequality, about how the industry treats certain people differently. I don't social issues that some people think should be kept separate from entertainment. Some people think that, do they? Jackson's voice was now quiet, which was more disconcerting than any shout. Michael, let me ask you something. When you wake up in the morning to choose whether or not you're black, the question detonated in the silence was absolute. That's not what this is about. Strahan said quickly, his face flushing. No, answer the question. Jackson insisted, his voice low and unwavering. Do you get to wake up and decide whether or not your race is going to factor into how people treat you that day? Because I sure don't. So when you tell me to keep my personal agenda separate from my work, saying is that my experience as a black man in America should be something I hide when I'm promoting a movie. Samuel, you're putting words in my mouth that I never said. Am I? Jackson's gaze was relentless. Because it sounds to me like you think there are certain topics I should avoid discussing, certain aspects of my life and experience that make you uncomfortable. The fact that you're calling basic human dignity and equal treatment a personal agenda tells me everything I need to know about where you stand. That's completely unfair. Strahan protested weakly. I never said anything about race or dignity or any of that. Keeping things appropriate for the audience and the time slot. The Jackson laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Appropriate for the audience. Michael, you just spent the last 10 minutes questioning my right to have opinions and suggesting that speaking honestly about my experiences is somehow aggressive or inappropriate. Now, you want to pretend this conversation isn't about exactly what it's about. Look, we're getting off track here. Strahan said, desperately trying to reset. Why don't we talk about your new film? I'm sure that's what people really want to hear about. Oh, now you want to talk about the film. Jackson's voice dripped with sarcasm. Spending all this time telling me how I should behave when I should think and why I should present myself to your audience. That's convenient. Strahan's professional facade finally began to crumble. I ever told you how to behave or what to think? I simply suggested that maybe there are better forums for certain types of discussions. Jackson repeated slowly. You mean discussions about real issues that affect real people? Discussions that might make some of your viewers think about something beyond their morning routine. Michael, do you hear yourself right now? I hear someone who's determined to make this interview about everything except the reason you're supposed to be here. Strahan fired back, frustration boiling over. Jackson stood up slightly in his chair, his voice carrying the full weight of his legacy. The reason I'm here is because your producers invited me to come and talk about my work. But apparently, you really wanted was for me to come here and be a good little celebrity, smile to you, say nothing of substance, and make sure I don't challenge anyone's preconceptions about anything. That's not true. Then explain to me what just happened here, Jackson demanded. Explain to me why a conversation about my film turned into you questioning my right to have opinions. Why you think it's appropriate to sit there and tell me how I should conduct myself as a public figure. Strahan looked directly into the camera, appealing to an unseen jury. I think our audience can see what's happening here. I asked some reasonable questions, and instead of having a normal conversation, we've got lectures and accusations. Jackson's eyes flashed. You just did it again. You just dismissed everything I said as lectures and accusations instead of addressing the actual points I raised. Michael, condescending and disrespectful from the moment I sat down. And now you want to play the victim because I called you on it. The breaking point was near. The director's frantic gestures from the control booth were being ignored. Professional, Strahan insisted, but the claim rang hollow. Professional. Jackson's laugh was bitter. Michael, you've questioned my integrity, dismissed my intelligence, and suggested that I should keep my mouth shut about issues that matter to me. If that's your definition of professional, then we have very different standards. Is then that Strahan made his catastrophic miscalculation, believing he could land a decisive blow. He leaned in. You know what, Samuel? He said his tone implying a devastating insight. The problem isn't with my questions. Maybe the problem is that you've become so used to people walking on eggshells around you that you can't handle it when someone treats you like a regular guest instead of giving you special treatment. The studio gasped. The word hung in the air. Well, special treatment? Jackson repeated, his voice deadly quiet. Michael, did you just suggest that expecting basic respect and professionalism is asking for special treatment? Seeing no retreat, Strahan pressed on with staggering stubbornness. Every guest who comes on this show gets the same treatment. I ask tough questions. I challenge people. That's what good interviewers do. Tough questions? Jackson's voice rose to its full, formidable power. Michael, you haven't asked me a single question about my craft, my preparation, my process, or anything related to why I'm supposedly here. Instead, you've spent this entire time trying to put me in my place and suggesting that I should be grateful for the opportunity to sit here and be insulted on live television. That's not what happened, and you know, Strahan shot back, but the fight was draining from him. Jackson stood up. Final, decisive. The audience recoiled at its suddenness. Michael, let me tell you what happened here. You decided before I even sat down that you were going to try to embarrass me on a show. You thought you could score some points by putting the uppity actor in his place. Miscalculated badly. I sit down, Samuel. We're not finished here. Strahan commanded a last futile attempt to assert control. Jackson's response was delivered with controlled, searing fury. Oh, we're finished. All right. Something crystal clear before I walk out of here. You don't get to tell me to sit down. You don't get to dismiss my concerns as lectures. Certainly don't get to suggest that expecting to be treated with basic human dignity is asking for special treatment. You're overreacting, Strahan said, his voice now small. Overreacting? Jackson's laugh was sharp. Michael, you just spent 20 minutes trying to humiliate a guest on live television, and when he refused to take it quietly, you accused him of overreacting. Do you understand how that sounds? Strahan looked around the silent, judgmental studio, finding no support. Look got a little heated. He offered a weak gesture toward compromise. Nofel, you got heated. I got disrespected. There's a difference. Jackson began to unhook his microphone. The gesture was symbolic, the point of no return. Samuel, wait. Strahan pleaded, panic in his eyes. We can work this out. Work what out? Jackson turned back, his expression one of pure unadulterated disgust. You've shown me exactly who you are. Michael, you've shown everyone watching exactly who you are. Don't do this. Don't walk out on live television. Jack paused, looking directly at Strahan with a gaze that could freeze fire. You know what the most pathetic part of this whole thing is? You actually think you're the victim here. That being called out for your behavior makes you the wrong party. I never meant for any of this to happen. Strahan said weakly, yes, you did. Jackson replied with absolute finality. You meant for exactly this to happen. You just thought it would go differently. Sit here and take whatever you wanted to dish out, smile and thank you for the privilege. Well, I've got news for you, Michael. Those days are over. Though he set his microphone down on the table with deliberate care. To everyone watching at home, I apologize that your morning show got turned into this circus, but sometimes you have to take a stand, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient. Samuel, please. Strahan tried one last time. No, Michael, you've said enough. Jackson walked to the edge of the set and turned back for a final parting statement. And just so we're clear, this isn't about being difficult or demanding special treatment. Refusing to be disrespected by someone who thinks his platform gives him the right to talk down to his guests. And with that, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the set, leaving a shell shocked Michael Strahan alone at the table of the silent studio, stunned viewers as his witness. The script had been thrown out, and in its place was a raw, unvarnished lesson in respect, dignity, and the power of knowing when to walk away. So there you have it. Breakdown on one of the most explosive morning show interviews ever conceived. What do you think? Was Samuel L. Jackson right to walk out, or should he have handled things differently? Because if this story teaches us anything, revealing moments happen when the cameras are rolling and someone decides finally that they will no longer follow a script that demeans them.